welcome everyone. I think it'd be very much in order today to give a shout out to our friends in Fiji. Been trying to get back over there to see them for quite some time, and their country is still closed to those who don't have a vaccine, and I'm one of them, and it's not going to change that way, but they will open in a little while, I'm sure, because other countries are doing that, and they will follow suit. So I'm looking forward to seeing our friends over there. And we just shout out to Pastor Paul and say, be strong and be courageous and go forward in the kingdom. And Moses and Sarah, bless you guys. Staying with Dad, make a difference in the church. And Rejnesh and Yogita, all of you, you're such a blessing. Looking forward to seeing you guys. Just hang in there and do what the Lord asks you to do, and we'll keep you in prayer. We're believing for your nation to be open. And if you get the opportunity, come see us. That'd be awesome. I would like that a lot. And so anyway, going forward, I want to continue with, we're talking about words of honor. And the reason I'm talking about honor specifically is because in a time of transition, it's easy to get on the wrong side of things and not even know you did it. And so you got to be careful with that. We talked about Daniel, and Daniel found himself in an amazing time of transition to the point where his country just got overrun. And the transition for him was, along with 10,000 captives, going to a whole new country and living under a king who thought he's God, Nebuchadnezzar. That's a pretty wild transition. I want to say something. If you can maintain a godly honor in a transition like that, you've got a good connection with the King of Kings. And so our transition may not be quite that dramatic, although it's looking fairly dramatic. So however our transition happens to turn out, I want to encourage all of us to maintain a godly honor, where we honor God and we honor those where honor is required in a right way. Like I said, we're not just chasing around, kissing up to them, trying to make something out of nothing. It has to be sincere from the heart, and it needs to be a godly honor, or we're out of line already. Does that make sense? And so as we walk in this honor, we found that you have to learn how to use honor, or learn how to be honorable, because those that are unlearned are not honorable. And if you ever want a perfect example about that, in our country, they talk about the hicks, or the ones that live back in the bush, or a very well-known term, the rednecks. And they take it upon themselves to be dishonorable and laugh about it. That's not okay. And I can say that because I grew up as a very young child in that exact area where those would come from that are called the rednecks. And the interesting thing about it is you don't have to be dishonorable because of where you grew up. You don't have to be dishonorable because you need to make a point. You can be very honorable and still make a very strong point. And so I know there's all kinds of jokes about the rednecks and all this kind of stuff, and we just enjoy some real goofy stuff and say, oh, that's very redneck, and almost can be proud of that. That's nothing to be proud of, actually. It's not honorable. And the interesting thing about it, and says, oh, wait a minute, you're really stepping on some toes now. Yeah, I know a lot of people that call themselves a redneck, but the interesting thing is just as important for them to be honorable as it is for me. So yeah, but you stand before people. That's all right. They also rub shoulders with people. And so wherever you happen to find yourself, honor is very powerful and very much in order. And the interesting thing about it is learning how to use honor can position you in a place that can be very powerful. Not knowing how to use honor can position you in a place where you'd sooner not be there. Let me just put it that way. It's not a good place to be. And so we found also earning honor makes you valuable to others. Isn't that interesting? A lot of people say, I don't want to be valuable to others. Oh, actually you do. Because even in your workplace, if you're not valuable to others, you're going to get the lowest wage, if any wage at all. You need to be valuable to others to get a wage. In your workplace, in your church, you need to be valuable to others to be in right standing with the King, because he looks at people as being valuable to others as very powerful in the kingdom. And then the third thing we said about positioning oneself, learning how to skillfully use honor. That's interesting. Because, well, how would you do that? Isn't that, just falling around, kissing up to something? No. Not that, not at all. Skillfully using honor is to see the true big picture and position yourself in that picture. And then you come across very valuable. What did we say about honor the other day? We said honor, the basic Greek definition of honor. See if I can find that real quickly here. The original Greek, it says honor means worth or value in a very literal sense, to the point where honor was an evaluation of a person's actions, where your actions are evaluated. So you can call yourself whatever you call yourself, whatever ethnicity you're walking with, wherever you find you can have all kinds of different titles. But the key is, do you have value in that position? That's what honor is about. It says honor, it says a very literal sense, honor is the evaluation of a person's actions which determine a person's worth. So do your actions determine worth? And then it completes that definition by saying your worth or your value to the community where you live. See, that brings others into it. There's a worth and a value, and some people say, well, I'm so good at mechanicking or fixing, say, boat motors. Little outboard motors are hard to fix because you should have 2 or 3 wrists on the same hand to reach in around those places. It's so tight. And so to be a good outboard mechanic, it takes a special knowledge of how to and why you do what you do to be able to fix that in that very confined space. And I know some people specifically that were very, very good in doing that. And they were sought after because they were so good at it. And so they thought they didn't have to honor anybody. That's not okay. You're not that cool and you're not that good that you don't have to honor anyone. And so them not understanding honor was very detrimental because they could have rose into a position that would have been awesome. And yet they were just maintaining a lower level position because they said, whatever, I am who I am. You can be who you are, just don't make who you are being a jerk, you can be honorable at who you are. As we continue on, we talked extensively about Daniel and how Daniel honored Nebuchadnezzar, which seemed almost impossible. And yet he didn't dishonor God. And he honored the magicians and the soothsayers, which seems, how could you honor them and still honor God? Because they are not godly. And yet he gave them honor where honor was due. It was interesting. We saw how Moses honored the Pharaoh. And how did he do it? He says, listen, I'll give you the honor of when should we get rid of these frogs. And Pharaoh, so interested in the honor, he missed it on getting rid of the frogs. He said, well, we'll do that tomorrow. So you have the honor of when to get rid of them, but you don't have the insight that maybe today would be better. But anyway, you see what I'm saying? So these honor situations that we talked about. Now, I was talking about, as we closed last time, about missing your destiny or damaging your future by not understanding honor. And wow, are there some examples in the Word. I think you could find some examples in commonplace too, and we're not here to mention names, but people that fell out of position because they didn't understand honor. But think about this one. This one is very, very powerful. And you find this event in 1 Chronicles 19, starting in verse 2. And this is where a king who was a friend of David passed away. And David sent an envoy to this king to mourn the passing of these people's kings. And so it says, David said, I will show kindness to Hanan, the son of Nahash, because his father showed kindness to me. You see, David is showing honor where honor is due. This king honored David. David says it's in order for me to honor him. And so his goal in this was to show kindness. So David sent messengers to comfort him concerning his father. And David's servants came to Hanan in the land of the people of Ammon to comfort him. You see why they came specifically? They came with a goal and an intent. They didn't just show up and say, hey, just passing through, just say, hey, sorry to hear about your dad. They came as a royal envoy to honor this guy because he lost his father. Now, this guy's the king now because his father passed away, but his father was an honorable king who honored David. And so David sent them to Ammon to comfort the new king. And the princess of the people of Ammon said to Hanan, the new king, do you think David really honors your father because he has sent comforters to you? Now that's what I want to talk about very first is recognize honor when honor comes. You know, I mean, there's a lot of people jostling for position and trying to elbow their way in, especially in our business world in the USA. Oh my goodness. You know, as elbow your way to the top. And they will act like there's honor. They will show you an honor card, but they're not honorable people. You know what I'm talking about. And it's all about positioning themselves. It's nothing about honor. Well, you need to recognize, is this honor or is this just a positioning thing? Because what happened, David sent an honorable envoy. And when they showed up, the princesses, the prince, the guys, not the princess, you know what I'm trying to say. I don't know what you would. The princes. Yeah, one S, not two S's. Got it. And so the deal with the ones in charge, the ones helping to oversee the country, they totally misread what's going on. And they said to the king, you think David is actually trying to honor you? He said, no, basically he's sending these guys to scope out your nation because, you know, dad's gone and he's coming to take over. Well, that wasn't truth. They misread completely, or else they were simply trying, who knows what they were trying to do. But I've seen a lot of manipulation when it comes to honor. It'll come across as honor, but it's not, it's manipulation. You need to know the difference. If you don't know the difference, it can cost your life. You know, look at Daniel honoring King Nebuchadnezzar. If he didn't know the difference, look at the other wise men. It nearly cost their life. You know, they came supposedly honoring the king to answer his question. They couldn't answer his question, so they stepped back and tried to lay it all on the king. That's that's not how it works. And nearly lost their lives, of all of them, not just one or two. And so here, again, they misread honor. They said, do you think David really honors your father because he sent comforters? Did his servants not come to you to search out and overthrow and spy out the land? Wow. So you have two ways of taking this. And you need to take it right. Because if they did send someone to spy out the land, you need to know they're coming to spy out the land. How do you know these things? How do you know? Naturally speaking, it's almost impossible to tell. With Nebuchadnezzar, he would get his magicians and his wise men and his soothsayers in there and say, hey, check with the spirits and see what's going on. Then finally he got a hold of Daniel and Shadrach and Meshach and Abednego, and he said, hey, check with God, the King of Kings, the Lord of Glory, find out what's going on. And things went well with him. So how do you know? Well, there's still the same option. Some people will read the horoscope in the newspaper to see what's going to happen on their birthday, you know, and say, whoa, wait a second. You be careful with that stuff. You have no business playing with that stuff. It's not okay. And then other people will go before the Lord because he does have the insight. He has the wisdom. Yeah, but how do you hear from God? Have you ever listened? Well, I sat quietly, you know, and what's happening when you're sitting quietly? You start reminiscing an old rock and roll song or something. I mean, yeah, all kinds of stuff come in when you sit quietly. All kinds of things, man. You get a to-do list that you didn't even know you had a to-do list that long. It'll come say hello to you when you're trying to sit quietly and listen to God. You'll hear some old music. You'll have some memories of what happened. You'll have some thoughts of what could happen. All of this stuff wants to come and visit with you when you try to get quiet and hear God.
I was going to say, when you're learning, keep tablet beside you for all of the to-do lists. After remembering in your head. Then you
That's
remember
a-
paper, and later you can go back and look at it.
That's a very, very powerful thing to do. And I've done that on my own, and I've actually heard other people recommend you do that. So that's not the first I heard it. But what Stephanie says is you keep a tablet of paper alongside of you when you're getting quiet before the Lord, and when something pops up, you just jot it down, and then you just push back, and you don't have to think about that just now. And your to-do list, it can be 3 pages on that tablet, but finally, you get it all written out. Now, that's for later. You're not going to forget it. You wrote it down. Now you can listen to the Lord. And so when we listen to the Lord and we start to find out, is this an honorable thing that's coming? Or is this something for somebody to establish themselves and take over something that is mine? So that's the key. But these guys, they missed it. They said, he's coming to take over and overthrow and spy out the land. Verse 4, therefore, Hanun took David's servants and shaved them. That was extremely dishonorable in that culture. You just didn't do that, especially with an envoy of high-ups from a government. You didn't do that. And then they cut off their garments in the middle of their buttocks and sent them away. I mean, that's seriously dishonorable. And these are dignitaries. I say, wow. And David heard what happened before they got home. He said, listen, stop in such and such a town along the way and wait till your beards grow back in, because it was that big of a deal. So, man, you're going to be waiting a little while for your hair to grow and your beard to grow back in, but you just do that. You wait until, and you can come back home honorably. And so it was an extremely high disgrace. And so that's completely opposite of honoring somebody, don't you think? And what happened? If you read that story, the cost of dishonor was incredible. Suddenly they found out they're on the wrong side of David. No kidding. Hello? I mean, what are you going to do to upset the guy? That would work. It did. It worked very well. 1 Chronicles 19, 6 and 7. It says, when the people of Ammon saw they had made themselves repulsive to David, Hanun and the people of Ammon sent 1,000 talents of silver. 1,000 talents. You remember a talent is 75 pounds? So 75,000 pounds of silver. Can you imagine that? They didn't have tractor trailers. How many camel loads is 75,000 pounds of silver? Wow. Do you think maybe that little bit of shaving off the beard and cut the clothing off at their buttocks and send them out of town, they all laughed as they're leaving, that was fairly costly, don't you think? 75,000 pounds of silver. Wow. You know that currently value is over $30 million. 30 million they're sending to a neighboring city. Now listen to this. They're 1,000 talents of silver to hire for themselves chariots and horsemen from Mesopotamia and from Syria, from Makkah, and from Zobah. So they hired themselves 32,000 chariots with the king of Mecca and his people who came and encamped before Mebah. Also the people of Ammon gathered together from their cities and they came to battle. Why are they there? They misread honor. Is that a huge cost? If you lay all that cost aside, what's it cost to have that army sitting there for a month? Oh my goodness. It gets really, really costly, don't you think? And so they all came to battle. Now, as they all came there to battle, David shows up, and you can understand it's not going to go well with them. They seriously dishonored him as he tried to honor them. That's probably the worst time you could dishonor somebody, when they're trying to honor you. And they dishonored him so badly. As you read the rest of that account, I'll let you do that on your own. I'm not spending a lot of time on it. But the war started. There was 47,000 casualties on the enemy's side. And multiple countries went into slavery, serving David and his nation. Can you see it? One act of dishonor, and a pretty major one, but one act of dishonor, it cost them 30 million in silver, 47,000 casualties, and multiple countries went into slavery. You think maybe it's worthwhile learning about honor? That king's kid, who now is the king, should have had extra classes, extra credit, extracurricular every evening his whole life to learn how to honor because he didn't know how. Because the first thing he did after he becomes king, he caused a catastrophe for the nation. Man, he didn't understand honor. And it cost him dear. It cost the neighboring nations who stood with him, cost them also because of honor. And so we look at that and say, how important is honor? How important is it? We think about that and sometimes say, well, it's you do that to be nice. It's more than just being nice. It positions you. Good or bad, it positions you. It positioned that king in a very bad place, did it not? It could have positioned him in an extremely good place. If he received them and received the honor from David, the connection that his dad made with David would become even stronger. You see that? And so the option was an even stronger alliance with King David, who knows God, or lose 47,000 soldiers and go into slavery. That's a pretty big deal. And that's only one. There's many times through the Word we see this, how things are laid out. I want to show you another one where Eli honors his family over God by not correcting his sons. And you say, oh, that's a rough one. It is. That's a very rough one. And the difficult part is Eli's a man of God. And Eli, Samuel grew up in the house. And boy, Samuel, I'm telling you what, I have a lot of respect for him. Growing up in that house and still walking the road before God, what a guy. What a guy. But anyway, Eli's sons, Samuel would have been, I don't know if you call that adopted or what, but he was in the household, for sure. He was raised, he grew up under Eli, but he was different than what would have been his elder brothers, which they'd be brothers because of being in the same household. You know what I'm talking about. And so the interesting thing about it is, 1 Samuel 3:11. Let me just read a bit to you. It says, then the Lord said to Samuel, behold, I will do something in Israel at which both ears of everyone who hears it will tingle. It's not you're just going to have your left ear tingling or your right ear. He says both ears going to tingle on this one. This one's a rough one. It says, verse 12, in that day I will perform against Eli all that I have spoken concerning his house from beginning to end. For I have told him that I will judge his house forever for the iniquity which he knows, because his sons made themselves vile. And he did not restrain them. Wow. Comes back on dad, because dad was in charge of the temple and the sons were abusing the privilege of being priests. And so dad didn't straighten things out. There's a big problem. There's no honor in the house of God. And so what happened? He says, verse 14, and therefore I have sworn to the house of Eli that the iniquity of Eli's house shall not be atoned for by sacrifice or by offering forever. It's a done deal. You can't go make a sacrifice and straighten it out. It's finished. So there was a battle between the Philistines, and it didn't go well. Israel lost 4,000 soldiers. So they sent for the Ark of the Covenant. This is all part of the same story. I'll allow you to read it on your own. I gave you the scripture reference there, 1 Samuel 3:11, and it continues on. They sent for the Ark of the Covenant. Well, what did they want? They wanted to bring God in on the situation, yes? But what did they do? They sent 2 dishonorable sons to carry it into the battle. Said, wait a minute. The decree had already gone out about Eli and his sons. And they went and they got into battle and they lost. And they said, well, that shouldn't have happened. It shouldn't have happened, but things were out of order in the house. And so they lost 4,000 soldiers. That's a lot. That's a lot. That's a huge loss. And so they came back, and the battles are a little different than they are today. Battle would start in the morning, it would stop in the evening. Then they'd regroup and do what they're going to do, and when the light comes up, then you go back to battle again. But you didn't battle at night. Not normally. Sometimes, but not normally. And so they came back and regrouped. They lost 4,000 soldiers. So Eli's 2 dishonorable sons carried the Ark of the Covenant to the battle. They said, now we have God with us. I would think they misread things a little bit, don't you think? It comes down to there was no honor in the house. And you don't carry the covenant without honor. It's amazing that they weren't struck dead carrying the covenant, the Ark of the Covenant. And so they carried them to the battle, and that time they lost 30,000 additional soldiers. 30, so they're up to 37,000. That's almost as much as we found when they dishonored David. That was 47,000. 37,000 soldiers gone. And what was the problem? There's no honor in the house. 1 Samuel 4:12, the death of Eli. Then a man of Benjamin ran from the battle line the same day, came to Shiloh with his clothes torn and dirt on his head. Now when he came there, Eli was sitting on a seat by the wayside watching, for his heart was troubled for the ark of the Lord. And when the man came into the city, he told it, and all the city cried out. When Eli heard the noise of the outcry, he said, "What does the sound of this tumult mean?" Then the man came quickly and told Eli. Eli was 98 years old, and his eyes were so dim he could not see. Then the man said to Eli, "I am he who came from the battle, and I fled today from the battle line." And he said, "Well, what happened, my son?" So the messenger answered and said, "Israel has fled before the Philistines, and there has been a great slaughter among the people. Also, your 2 sons, Hophni and Phinehas, are dead, and the ark of God has been captured." Wow. So on top of the 30,000 and the 4,000 the day before, now he lost his 2 sons and the ark. He says, "Your 2 sons and the ark of God is captured." Verse 18, then it happened when he had made mention of the ark of God, Eli fell off the seat backwards by the side of the gate, and his neck was broken, and he died. For the man was old and heavy, and he had judged Israel for 40 years. Wow. We don't read of Eli being dishonorable, but he didn't correct those under him in their dishonorable ways. And it was directly related. So we didn't read of that first king being dishonorable in any way. In fact, he honored David. David said, "I'm going to honor him because he honored me." And yet he didn't teach his son honor, and honor was not in the house when David's envoy came to honor them. Now, when the battle started, honor was not in the house when the battle started. And they not only lost 34,000, they lost 2 priests and the Ark of the Covenant. That's amazing. So I just wanted to go over a couple of those things, reminding us how important honor is. And I touched on very briefly, and I don't think I'm going to take a lot of time this evening also, but read the story about when Saul and Jonathan entered into that battle. And Saul said, "No one can eat anything until I avenge my enemies." Jonathan didn't hear it, but he ate something anyway. Read that story. For the simple reason that, in fact, I believe I can give you the reference on that story right here. 1 Samuel 13 through 14:44. And you'll see that Jonathan hadn't learned honor. Because Jonathan, there's a big difference between chatting with one who is above you. Let me put it this way. Do you remember when I would do some teaching about the house of the Lord and the camp of the Lord? Do you remember that? In the camp of the Lord, you're under a commander. There's a mission. There's a reason you're there. You're going to battle. And you do not question the commander, period. In the house of the Lord, it's a safe place. You're eating at the table with Daddy. The commander could be Daddy in this case. And you can chat with Daddy, and you can ask him what's up with this and what's up with that. And it's okay. We've seen Jonathan earlier on. He's chatting with Daddy at the table. He says, "Why are you upset with David? Because he's only done good for our country." And things, he was chatting. That's okay. But now later you see Saul and Jonathan on the battlefield. Saul makes a decree as the commander-in-chief, and Jonathan challenges it. And he challenged it to the point where separating Saul and his men. That's not okay. And so when we see those kinds of things, we got to understand the honor thing. You have to know when and how to honor. When you're in the house, you can chat with Dad and ask, well, why this and why that? Do you remember when Moses was on the mountain and he was getting the 10 Commandments? And the Lord said, Moses, you need to go down now because the people that you brought out of Egypt are having a problem. They're being very disorderly. And he says, and I'm going to kill them all. And he says, I'm going to start a new nation with you. And Moses says, no. The people that you brought out of Egypt, which is really interesting, see, they can chat. They're on father-son terms. They're not before the multitude, and there's no dishonor among them. And the thing about it is, as Moses gave his statement, the Lord God Almighty changed his mind. And people say, well, that doesn't happen. It did. It's written, man. And he says, okay, you go down there and take care of it. And he said, but this is where we stand. And so that's honorable, and yet Moses was challenging what the Lord was saying, but it was totally honorable. But now you take Moses and he's in front of the whole group of Israelites. And the Lord tells Moses specifically, speak to the rock. And Moses smites the rock, and he says some words about the stiff-necked people, and they were. I mean, he wasn't really saying anything that the Lord didn't say up on the mountain, was he? Talking about the stiff-necked people, and he smites the rock, and the rock gave water, but yet now he couldn't go into the promised land because he dishonored God. Do you see it? So when they were chatting on the mountain, he challenged God directly on what God said he's going to do. And God says, okay, and changed his mind. But when they're standing in front of the people, you don't dishonor the commander-in-chief. You don't ever do anything to separate the people from their God, being the King of Kings. We do everything we can to separate the people from their gods with a small g when they're serving all the wrong gods, because that's not okay. But you understand what I'm saying? And so that's the two sides of the coin that we're talking about. Honor, how to and where to. Now, if the king would have brought David's envoy in and chatted with them and see where they're coming from and listen to them and get his wise men to hear what they're talking about and weigh out whether they're there for honor or whether they're there scoping out the land, say, hey, let's see what we can find. That would be in order. But to just decide offhand, well, you know what, they didn't come honorably, and send them away extremely dishonored, that cost him his nation. And so I hope it's making sense, because this honor thing is so important, because right now we're stepping into a major transition. Business transitions, government transitions. There's transitions of those who think they're running the world. We'll find out for sure they're not. And there's others, there's people that have walked a proper and honorable walk before the Lord that were completely unheard of, that are suddenly be making some major decisions on a worldwide basis because we're coming into something that big. And so coming into that, we need to recognize and understand a bit about honor. So that when we have the opportunity, we honor things where they need to be honored. And we challenge things that need to be challenged. Because we don't want to just say, oh, it's all about honor, and then just go around and miss something that's coming to stand against the Lord and his kingdom. That's not okay either. So hopefully that's making sense to you. That's what I wanted to bring to you today. I hope that as we have those three packages, it can come into one, and you can say, you know, it's very, very important that we learn honor. And so as we learn honor, as we walk in it, we don't want to be the one who lost 47,000 people and cost $30 million to bring in other countries to their game, and they go into slavery. That's a pretty bad heritage. Yeah.
Because that battle was only the start. Because later Jones went back and destroyed them again.
That's right. That was only the beginning of it. Yeah. And you come to find out, you know, it's hard to stop something when you have something going that wrong. And then when you have something that's going absolutely amazing, it's like when Nebuchadnezzar honored Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego because their God protected them in the fire. He says, now everybody needs to honor that God, or I'm going to turn your houses into a pile of rubble, and so on and so on. I mean, he was some kind of guy. But you see how important honor is on both sides. We need to understand it. We need to use it correctly. We need to not honor where honor is not due. I mean, that's out of line also. And so with those examples, I hope it helps us to understand how honor works. And so, Jim, would you like to close in prayer, or do you have a few words for us? Or thank you, Jim.
Let's just close with a word of prayer. Thank you, Father, for your word to us, Lord, for teaching us on honor. Lord, I pray that you would open our eyes and help us to see who is honorable and how we can honor those around about us. And Lord, we choose to honor you in all that we do. Lord, I pray that you'll be with us as we go this week and help us to spread your word as we go. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.